So we're going to head through a couple of different things today. So we're just going to dive right in, get going on it. We have our a lot of our team. I think we've got everybody here. So if it's okay, maybe I'll let you all go around and make a brief introduction. I'm in the bottom left-hand corner. I'm Brooke. I work a lot with the Masters of Data Science program. I'm also the director of specialized masters coaching in our office. And you may have seen my one word that I picked was learning, was my one word. Zeke, if you don't mind my putting you on the spot, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hey everyone, I'm Zeke Artiaga. I am the new MMarc coach, so Master of Marketing coach. Started on the 9th. I'm super excited to be here. I've been going through a lot of onboarding and training, and just really happy to start connecting with incoming students soon. So watch out for updates. Thanks for being here.
Great, thank you, Zeke.
Yeah, I can go next. Hi everyone, I'm Ginny. I've noticed some of the familiar faces or names from our past sessions. I'm the primary coach for MSF and I work closely with Byung-ho and Brooke on that. So I didn't type in my one word. If anything, it would be reconciliation or reconciling. That's because I have a finance background, being in the industry for 14 years. Now I'm a career coach, so kind of reconciling the two personalities and identities.
Great.
Morning, everybody. I'm Kathleen. Zeke is the new MMarc coach. I'm the old MMarc coach transitioning out. I'll be staying with the CMC, but I'll be working with MBA students in the fall. And if you, like me, are hungry often, there's always food at Owen. So that is a fun fact.
That's great. Srinidhi, do you want to go next?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Srinidhi. I'm one of the graduate assistants, and I work more specifically with the data science students. And it's been great getting to see you all here every week and see some familiar and new faces.
And hi, everybody. My name is Byung-ho. I work primarily with Ginny on the MSF student population. I'm really excited to meet all of you guys when you come to the fall, and look out for next week's session where I'll be leading informational interviewing.
Awesome. Thank you for that teaser too. I will say I count myself really fortunate to work with each of these folks. They're wonderful. I hope you get to know them. They're pretty terrific. So some of you who joined us, I'm going to run through some of this. Some of you who've joined us before know some of this, but just to hit on this, the goal of our office is to help you advance in your career. That's what we do. That's what we're about. It's a lot of fun getting to do that. This is if I had to condense what the Career Management Center does to a single page, this does a pretty nice job of it. We are all on the coaching side of our office. So if you look at those green bars in the middle, we're all directly contacting students and working with students, which is part of what makes our job so fun. There is a side of our office that works with employers, employer engagement and recruiting, and you'll see a little bit more about that in a moment. We work with people in a large number of ways. Doing workshops like this is one of them. We also meet a lot with students one-on-one and work on resumes, interview prep, negotiating, all kinds of things like that. We also lead internship and job search groups. So you'll be getting more of a taste of that, but want to give you some heads up of what to be expecting. So I mentioned that some of our staff also works with employers, and these are the three folks that are on the employer relations team. So you'll have some contact with them, but they're, like I said, they're not primarily working with students directly, but you will get to see them some. So I hope that you've been able to join us over the summer for some of the sessions that we've been doing. We have on our YouTube page a link to the past sessions that we've done. I will say, if you check out the YouTube channel, great to see what we've done before. Each of the sessions that we're doing has some pretty interactive sessions that we do, time that we do. So today we're going to have a little bit of time in breakout rooms, for example, working on some things. So I feel like watching the video is great. It won't get you everything, so I'm glad that you all are here attending live. So the first session we did, I led one on career exploration. A lot of great resources out there. You can check it out. I will say one of the things that did not work so well last time was I was trying to share a resource from the 1220 system, and it gives you access to where past students have worked. And that link was not working. It is working now. I apologize. Some of you were very patient as we were working on that. We're reorganizing the 1220 resource library. So if you want to see past information around where Masters of Finance students, Masters of Data Science students, Masters of Marketing students, all the groups that are represented here, where people in the past have found internships or jobs for that program, you could find that through that link. All right. So next session, Jenny led us 2 weeks ago talking about skill gap analysis. If you haven't worked on the gap analysis worksheet, that is super helpful. We're going to refer to that a couple of times in talking about working on your resume. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. It's a great resource. That is also something you can find through the resource library. And I will share these slides for everybody who's attending here. I'll share these slides and some of these links if you want to follow up on some of the links. So after gap analysis, if you joined us last week, Trinity boldly led us in talking a bit about your story and your plan and putting that together, which is another thing. Hopefully you're kind of seeing the content we're doing is sort of building on each other. All these things are relevant to working on your resume. Trinity talked a little bit about working on this fit approach for talking about what you did in the past and relating that to where you're transitioning to. Really helpful way to go about approaching that. And then also a little bit about this past, present, future framework as some ways to kind of think about telling your story. I can't overemphasize it. Telling your story is so important because it relates to networking, it relates to interviewing, and also relates to what we're talking about today of your resume. Like, I would say your story is sort of the why and the how, and the resume is a lot of the like what you did. So if you don't have your story down, I think it can be pretty hard to think about your resume, which is where we're heading today. So yeah, today we're talking about resume. We'll touch a little bit on LinkedIn profile, but focusing a lot on resume. And then we have other sessions coming up. We'll talk more about those towards the end. All right, so first off, we're going to kind of break today's session into 2, maybe 3 parts. First part is talking a lot about the format of a resume, the form of the resume, how it's sort of structured. And then the second part, we'll talk a little bit about the content of the resume, like what actually goes into the resume. And then we're going to do an exercise. I have more resume exercises and activities than the average person. And we're doing my favorite one today. So I'm excited about getting to do that. Okay, so first off, and I'll say too, as we're going through this, if questions come up, feel free to drop those in the chat and we can talk about those. And also some of the other staff that are joining us, they may hop in, they may have thoughts or ideas. And actually, gosh, I would just want to say whoever helped remember to record, thank you so much. I'm glad that somebody remembered that. I did not remember that. We are recording, just so you know, so we will have this. So before we get into that, I have a couple of questions I want to ask. Okay. So just launched this poll, and before we get into talking about resumes, I'm curious, if you had to pick one, what do you think is the single most important factor in recruiting? You can see the answers, the options there: resume, cover letter, skills, knowledge, certification. Is it networking? Is it the interview and how you do the interview, or is it something else? What do you all think on that? I will say I don't necessarily have, I don't know if there's like a perfect or right answer to this. So don't worry about that. Plus it's just a poll, so we can't tell who did what. Okay, last call before we end that. All right, here we go. I'm going to share the results. So which is the most important factor in recruiting? Wow, pretty overwhelming. You all said networking. It's worth noting second most common was resume, certainly an important part. Nobody said cover letters. Those can be tough. We're going to be talking more about those, but those can be a challenge. Skills, knowledge, certifications. I will say it's interesting, especially in certain areas. I'm curious. I wonder if some of our data science students were a bit heavier on the skills, knowledge, certifications, because some of them can get some pretty technical interviews asking you to be able to do concrete things. One person also said interviewing, worth calling that out as well. So awesome. Thank you for that. Oh, Jocelyn, that's a great question. If someone from my team doesn't mind sharing that link of where the past sessions were on YouTube, that would be great. I've got one more poll I'm going to launch right now. which is, I'm curious about if you think about how you found your last job or internship, what helped you the most in finding that? Kathleen, thanks for sharing that, that link for us. So options here, applying online versus Indeed or LinkedIn, applying through your school, could be Handshake, could be Simplicity. I know there are other systems out there. It could be through a career fair. It could be working there previously. It could be through school alumni contacts or friends or family. So I'm curious to see, yeah, what you all think. Awesome, we had everybody respond. So, answer is definitely a bit more mixed on this one. So top answer was applying online via Indeed or LinkedIn, 38% saying that. Had two folks who said applying through their school through Handshake. One person said through a career fair. Two people through previous work there. Second most common answer was school or alumni contacts, and friends and family was third. So interesting. I mean, in my mind, those last two definitely heavier. Last three are definitely heavier on kind of the network side, which I will say, if you take those together, you're hitting a pretty large percentage. But also certainly applying online, which is where places like a resume and a cover letter would have a little bit more weight potentially. So awesome. Cool. Thank you for indulging me on that. Always cool to kind of see that. Okay, so resume formatting, let's dig in. With resume format, I'm just going to touch on like what I view as a couple of the key things. So first off, please make your resume one page. I will say, if you're listening to me, you're saying, Brooke, why are you saying that? I will say, wait till the end of our session today. And I think I can give you a pretty good reason why that you can experience yourself why employers would say that's important. Second thing, I think this is pretty clear, no errors, spend time reviewing your resume so that there are no errors, there are no problems. That can be a very easy reason to get you pulled. You don't want to get yourself pulled from an application just because of that. The next thing is consistent formatting. And if you're not familiar with that, we have a Vanderbilt template for an Owen template for resumes. And we encourage all the programs to use that. If you're curious, this has some links, and I will share that in the email I send after this, but hopefully you're familiar with resources for these, for MMark and for data science. In the 1220 resource library, there's a place where you can go to pull the template that's specific to your program. For Masters of Finance, if you're going through the career curriculum, there's a place in part 2, the resume section, where you will see some sample resumes. All of those are using a sort of the Vanderbilt Owen template. This is a quick look at the template for data science. Basically, what we're doing is hopefully, Andrea, that is a great question. If somebody doesn't mind doing that, and I apologize because I did not make it easier by those on my team of adding these slides yet to our Teams channel. I can also, when we take a break, I can also go back and add those in if that helps too. For the resume template, basically, hopefully what we're doing is taking away a lot of the questions or the like, hey, how do I do this? And it's just, the whole thing with the resume template is that we're trying to keep things formatted as consistently as possible. There's no real magic to it. The reason that we want it consistent, Kathleen, thank you for sharing the MMark resume template. The reason that we ask you all to use the template is because employers request it. Again, when the activity we have coming up, I think you're going to see some of the value of the resume template. I will say occasionally people ask questions like, hey, I watched, gosh, what was that movie? It was Legally Blonde, where it's like you create your resume and you put it on pink paper and you spray it with perfume and it stands out and everybody's like, oh wow, that's awesome. I mean, I have heard from a lot of recruiters like, have your resume stand out because it's got great content. Don't have it stand out because it's flashy or showy. I mean, the thing that comes to my mind would be like, if you're walking into a networking event and you're wearing tons of perfume and a pink boa, like, is that how you want people to remember you? My guess is probably not. Like, impress them by having, by your manners, impress them by your good content of what you say, by bringing a lot to the table, by knowing your stuff. Don't go for the trying to just grab somebody's attention real fast. Usually that doesn't work well. So yeah, so resume templates, encourage you to use those, and that will hopefully simplify. Also, if you need a quick lesson on right aligning content, like you can see the dates and locations, there is a good way to do that without spacing. Right align tabs can be a helpful friend, and that's already taken care of if you use the template. So, okay, I'm going to keep moving on a couple more things with formatting resumes. Again, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Thank you for the questions that are coming through already. Remove file metadata. If you're not familiar with this, I will say a concrete example. We recently had, we were hiring, actually it was for Zeke's position, and Zeke did not do this, but one of the other applicants we did, someone who has worked in career services for a while, they sent a resume, and when I opened it up, there was a name at the very top of the PDF document, and I was like, this person's name does not match the applicant. What happened here? And it was the metadata. Actually, that person had, I guess they'd helped their spouse. They'd helped their spouse create a resume. And so I pulled up the document, and I was getting their spouse's name on the top of the resume. And that can happen if you're not familiar with this, especially if you open a document, a PDF document, depending upon how you open it, sometimes you'll see who the original author of the document was. I think that's what had happened with this applicant. So it's important to remember how to remove file metadata. When I send the follow-up email, I will send a link with a file that we have that gives some more information on that. If you also just want to Google, there's some great quick YouTube videos on how to remove file metadata. That's important, especially like we're talking about before. If you're using the ON template, you want to remove the metadata so they're not seeing like, oh, that this is the ON template, that you're seeing your name on it instead. Okay. Trinity, thank you for sharing the link for the data science resume template. This is some content from Steve Dalton, and this gets a little bit into the bullets and some of the other things. I like his quick way of kind of looking at this. The difference between a basic resume and a great resume is often getting into the strength of your bullets and how you're providing results. So yeah, and I love that question he's asking. Why did my company pay me to do this? Here are a couple examples, again, from Steve Dalton's resources, taking a bullet and kind of teasing it out with a lot more detailed description. I know, like, this is, I review lots of resumes. We all review lots of resumes. My single most common comment when I'm reviewing a resume is there a way you can quantify this? Is there a way you can talk about results? You know, why did you do this? What happened as a result of that? So the more you can think about that, the better. Here's another example. This is from a past student. The first bullet that you see is what was a bullet that was on their original resume. And we said, hey, that really is pretty vague. I'm not like, I look at that first bullet and I have a hard time picturing what that is. There's no mental image for me. So we worked with that student, and bottom is, and I would say it's a better bullet. I think it could still be improved on further, but they kind of like that as kind of teasing out a little bit more specifically what they did. And for me, I can look at that and I can see them, hey, mentoring over 20 crew members and 2 store managers and helping them think really specifically about how those stores operate. I can picture that. I don't have much of a mental image from the first bullet. I think that second bullet could be even stronger if they talked about, like, how many different stores are we talking about? Is it just one? Is it multiple? You could even get in a little bit more results there as well. So that gives a very concrete example of what that could look like. So yeah, so I'd spend some time working through the bullets of your resume. This is a concept that we're going to come back to, especially when we get to interviewing, but I think it can be very helpful for some of your bullets to use the project action results format, where you're thinking about, you know, what was the project that you undertook? What was the specific action that you took within that project? And then what were the results, what were the outcomes of what you did? And where you can quantifying those results. So that can be a really helpful way to approach that. I will say, in my mind, building a strong resume really sets you up well for interviewing. And I think the more that you can kind of keep that in mind, doing a nice job on your resume so that you're in good shape for interviewing, I think that'll be of a lot of help. Okay, before we move on, this is kind of the summary of what we talked about for things to keep in mind when you're talking about the format of resumes. Are there any quick questions that come up about the formatting side of resume before we get into the content? Talking about like, what is it that you actually decide to put on the resume? Is there anything that comes to mind? Feel free to either drop it in the chat or you can unmute yourself if there's anything that comes up. Any takers? All right. Taylor, transitioning to grad school resume, what section would be the largest part? Gosh, that is a good question. I will say Taylor, do you mind if I ask what program you're in? Because that can have a little bit of an effect on this.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I can hop on here.
Yeah.
I'm in the MMark program, and I was just wondering, I know when you're an undergrad, a lot of the times like accolades and awards and leadership and extracurriculars and just tend to be the largest part of your resume just due to lack of experience. But I know that changes a lot into grad school. So I just wanted to hear your input on that.
Yeah. I have a vague answer and I have a little bit more concrete answer. So, but I'm glad you're thinking about that because that's a really good thing to be thinking about. The vague answer and the answer that I think the quick answer on almost everything in my mind when it comes to resume content is, what do the employers want? What's most important to the employers? What's most relevant? And you may say, well, that's a good question. I'll give you some resources and we can dig more into that of how you know that. I would say more specifically, and Kathleen, Zeke, hop in on this if you have thoughts. I would imagine for most of our MMark students that the experience section is probably the single largest section. Okay, good. I got a thumbs up. Good sign. Just because that's usually where the most of that relevant experience often comes from. And that relevant experience section, it could be anything from, I mean, everybody thinks of past jobs or internships. If I would have answered when I asked about which program you were in, for data science students, a lot of them will have a project section that talks about, oh, I used SQL before and here's how I used it. I mean, if anybody's in the MMark or MSF program and you're pursuing more data focused role, you may want to do some of the same thing, for example. So sometimes a project section or a leadership section can also be helpful with that too. You can even allude to some of that in an education section where you talk about specific classes you've taken in the past or you will be taking at Vanderbilt. So good question. And thank you for sharing that. Okay. I'll keep going. If there are other questions, yeah, feel free to drop them in the chat box. We'll have more time for questions later on too. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about resume content. Again, we start out with that exercise. What's the one word to describe yourself? I mean, gosh, that is so reductionistic, so hard to think of just one word. It's so hard to condense your whole life experience down to a single page, but that's what we're asked to do. I don't know if any of you remember from growing up in grade school, we would do this in a couple of classes, do this exercise, like write your history of today. And you're like, oh, well, where do I start? Is like when I woke up, was it when I brushed my teeth, was when I had breakfast, was when I got to school, like what do I, and it's this whole exercise, it seems like, in like what's important enough to put on the sheet of paper and what's not. And I think with the content of a resume, it's the same question. And you already heard my big answer is, well, what's going to matter to your audience? What's the employer going to care about? If it's not relevant for them, you don't want it on that resume. If it is relevant, then the more relevant, the more you want to highlight that and focus on it. So you use resumes in a lot of different places. So I think it's good to keep in mind that resumes are used for applications, but it's also used for all of these different other things that we talked about. Keep that in mind. It's not only for applications. And like we talked about, if you do a good job on your resume, it's going to help you a lot with interviewing. So let's take a quick step back from talking about what goes on the resume to think a little bit about how it can be used, especially after you do apply. It can be used in many different ways, but one of the ones I think people think of most often is use your resume to apply. This is an example of an employer that kind of listed out there, hey, this is a number of different jobs that we had in 2015. And you can see you started with a number of applicants, then you move to that next step of screening, figuring out based on the screening which candidates are actually qualified based on the requirements on the posting. Then you actually extend interviews. Then from that, you're narrowing it down a lot to who you're actually going to extend offers, but not everybody accepts an offer. Then you've got the actual number of people hired. So it's a little bit of a reverse pyramid here, as you can see. A lot of people starting out in applications, but only a small number that are getting offers. So I think it's just good to keep in mind kind of the broader scope of what that looks like, but also remember that resumes are part of that, but they're not the only thing, right? So applicant tracking system, ATS, if you're not familiar with that acronym. If you're applying to a large company, this is something that you're going to run into. A lot of people are aware that you apply on a big company application on their website, and you apply, it goes into the black hole. What happens after that? So I'm going to try to give you at least a little bit more of a glimpse into what happens to that. So there are a couple of companies out there that create job applicant tracking systems. Workday is the second one you see. The first one was JobVite. And if any of you have had access to these, basically behind the scenes, this is looking at who are all the different candidates. You can kind of see on that second one, the Workday one, you can kind of see like, hey, there were 24 different candidates that they're reviewing, 15 who they are screening, 1 who they're having do an assessment at present, and 7 who are doing an interview. 2 have made it to the background check stage. So again, it's kind of this moving someone through this process from a recruiter side. So you may be asking at this point, Brooke, why are we looking at all of this? What does this have to do with my life? It does have something to do with your life. And I will say, I'm thoroughly convinced that one of the most important things for succeeding in a job search is being able to put yourself in the shoes and think like an employer. And I think the more that you can do that and think about their needs, the better. If you want a concrete example of that, stay tuned. I think you're going to get a pretty good one in a little bit. But if you're wondering what happens after you apply, in most large companies, this is what's going to happen. You're going to go to a system like this, and you're going to get sorted. Now, part of the reason that we had the gap analysis exercise that we did a couple of weeks ago is because that's one way to start thinking about what is it that employers really want. So here's a gap analysis where we started filling it out for an investment banking summer associate role, and basically taking the job description and breaking it down and saying like, hey, what are the qualifications they're looking for based on the job description? So a short answer of what is the employer looking for and what you want to kind of feed back to them is look at the job description. Okay. I know those are not the most fun thing to read, but I think is something as simple as pulling those out and highlighting and saying what's the most important thing they're looking for. That can really make sure that you're kind of responding with the right information on your resume. There are other ways to do this. One of the ways that you can do this is you can use tools like JobScan. If you're not familiar, I believe the website is jobscan.co. I believe you can use it for 2 or 3 times for free before they start trying to charge you. And what I would say is, I'll talk a little bit more. Thank you, Kathleen, for the link on that. So what happens is you take the content of your resume, you upload it here. Then after you do that, you upload, the next part is it gives you a place to put in the content from a job posting. And what I would do if I were you is I would find multiple job postings that have the same title. So different companies, but same title, and put a couple of them in so you can kind of get your most out of this. And typically within a certain job title, there's not a huge amount of difference. It could be some. Then after that, JobScan uses an algorithm very similar to what is used by a lot of the applicant tracking systems we're looking at. And it says, so you can see here in this case, wow, for this job description, 3 times Android was mentioned, and this applicant 4 times mentioned Android use on their resume. So that's a good sign. Now, however, iPhone was mentioned twice in the job description, but was not used on the resume. So if you have experience in this case working with doing software design for an iPhone app, I would make sure to highlight that if you're applying to this role. So an example of how you could do that. We'll come back to AI prompts. Actually, I'll ask you all. I'm curious. We're talking about kind of what JobScan can do, and a lot of it is kind of doing some filtering and kind of saying like, hey, here's the job description, here's your resume. Have you all had any success? Because now, thanks to things like ChatGPT, you can do a lot of that through generative AI. Are there are there prompts that you all have been using that have been helpful for you in terms of going through and looking at your resume and thinking of how it could be improved? Anybody have any?
I don't really have any prompts for a resume per se, but something I've been using ChatGPT for is networking. Like whenever I need to like cold DM somebody on LinkedIn to just like, get like 30 minutes of their time. That's been, I mean, it varies depending on the person, obviously. And you have to tweak a few things. But I think it's really helpful for networking, like, just writing like how many characters you can on like a cold LinkedIn DM.
So yeah, so helping you think of like what you want to use to DM them, what's the message you want to send them. That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Dan. That's an awesome example. Anybody else? Any others have thoughts on using AI to help with resumes? Has anybody done that already? Use ChatGPT to help review your resume and get input on it? Byung-ho, if you don't mind my putting you on the spot on that, anything that you would add or suggest? We were talking a little bit about this before.
Yeah, something that I've seen on the undergrad side, I also work at the undergrad career center, is the people that put in their resume and then they also put in their job description, they can ask it to kind of do analysis and say, is this a good match? Can you rate my resume or bullet point descriptions based off of competence or based off of, let's say, friendliness or some sort of metric that you wanted to base it off of? It can kind of help you give you one perspective, but of course, we do recommend going to a coach. So it's kind of a starting point. But definitely feel free to explore and use some of those metrics when you're putting in prompts.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'm hoping after our activity, we'll come back to this too. If you'll have other thoughts or with some more prompts on this. But yeah, I mean, I would say two things to keep in mind if you are using generative AI. One thing I'd encourage you to do is if you are doing it, I would suggest not sharing, like, would suggest this with JobScan. I would not put in your contact information, just unless you want that out there. I would think instead about, think about the information that's public, like things that are already on your LinkedIn profile and sharing that content. But I wouldn't be sharing, cell phone numbers or things like that on AI. Next thing I would keep in mind is it seems like AI can often be really great in giving you a place to start, but it's usually like, AI doesn't always of course, it doesn't know you, it doesn't know what things you've done and haven't done. So keep in mind that whatever you get from AI, you'll want to definitely edit and make sure that it is correct. And it is not talking about the time that you climbed Mount Everest and were a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, if you did not indeed do those things. Okay, so next up, we are going to move to an exercise. And I think this is going to be a nice way to kind of, like I said, summarize some of the things that we have been talking about already. So okay. So exciting news is that you may not know this, but you just got hired as a contract recruiter from Mattel. Congratulations. Your contract is only for the next 20 minutes, so it's a little bit short, but I think you're going to do some great work. I'm really excited to see what you're going to come up with. So here's what we're going to do is I'm going to give you all 2 minutes of silence to review the file that I just sent over. This is basically it's 2 pages, and as you're in your 20-minute long role as a recruiter for Mattel, you are going to be reviewing a couple of resumes for the job description that I just shared. So the second page of what I shared is the job description. So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to take a look through that. I'll just keep things silent. If you have a question, put it in the chat box, but I'll give you about 2 minutes to look through that. And then we'll come back and I'll follow up with the next steps in this. Okay. So good luck on reading that job description. 30 seconds left on looking at the job description, so wrap up on that. All right. Well, like I said, I know reading through job descriptions is not the most entertaining thing. Those of you who've ever written them, they can be a little bit hard to write. They can be a little bit dry, but I hope you're starting to see that there can be some good things that you can learn from those. Okay, so next up, I just dropped in the chat box 6 resumes. I will say, if it helps with this exercise, the job description you have is directly off of our recruiting system, the one that we used to use. The resumes, all that we did was pull off the contact information for the personal information for the people who applied. So you're going to see those resumes in a pretty raw state. There are MBA students who graduated a couple years back. But what I would like you to do now is take a look through those 6 resumes and spend some time thinking about which candidate you think would be the best. Who would you like to pick to move forward in this? So I'm going to give you all 3 minutes to do this just by yourself. And then after that, we'll break everybody into groups and you'll take a look at that with your group. So I'm going to give you about 2.5 more minutes to review those resumes, and then we'll take questions before we have you all go into groups. I'll see you over then. Thirty more seconds. All right. For the record, you are nearly halfway done with your contract as a recruiter. I hope it's going okay. So having, I'm curious, any gut reactions to looking at those resumes? Does anybody see now why employers want 1-page resumes? We all want 2, 3, 4-page resumes. Does that sound good? I don't know about you, but I mean, this example is a little bit different in that, you know, sometimes you can have hundreds of applicants apply for a role. We condensed it down to just 6, but I don't know if for you all, for me, looking at 6 resumes, my head can start to spin, and I definitely want 1-page resumes and not 2. And I think that's why employers continue to ask for that. So anyways, before we break you all into breakout rooms, when you get into your breakout room, if you would go ahead and you'll groups will be about 4 or 5 people. If you would, with your group, first off, introduce yourself, share your name, share a little bit about what you're doing over the summer, which program you're heading into. And then if you would, as a group, discuss who you recommend to move forward, which candidate would you choose and why? Why do you think that candidate would be best? And if you would pick one person from your group when you all come back, we're going to have, you know, each group kind of share a little bit out. Have one person from your group who can give a little bit of input on who you picked and why. All right. Any questions? All right. Trinity, thank you for making the breakout rooms. And if y'all would, go ahead and join your room. If you run into any questions, feel free to hop on back to this and we'll help you out. But yeah, otherwise get with your group and start figuring out which candidate you pick.
You want to pause the recording?
All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for thanks for taking some time with that. I hope you had some good discussion with your group. And before your time wraps up as a recruiter, I'm curious to hear what you all thought. So if you don't mind, someone from Trinity, were there 5 groups? Is that right?
5.
Awesome. Someone from group 1, do you mind sharing a little bit about who your group recommended and why?
Yeah, I can go. I'm like 95% sure we were group 1. But so our group, we were deciding between resume 2 and 3, but ultimately we selected number 3 due to in the job description it talked about needing somebody that can do public speaking to small and large groups. And we noticed that they listed that critical experience, resume 3 did. That they are comfortable with public speaking and that they've spoken to large groups.
Awesome. I like your rationale. I mean, finding something on the job description that's important and then seeing, is that reflected on the resume? Great. Thank you, Taylor. Group 2, does someone from group 2 mind sharing who they picked and why?
Group 2 was Jamie, Jyotika, Tamara, Tori, and Wendy.
You can also drop in the chat if that would be easier. We'll keep moving. Group 2 can come back if you have anything. Group 3, do you have any thoughts on who you picked and why?
We went with candidate 4. We felt that that candidate had the most solid resume with giving like specifics to all the projects and like concrete data. That is ultimately why we went with that candidate.
Awesome. Thank you, Madison, for the input. Yeah, it sounds like the fact they were pretty concrete on the resume, pretty specific about what they did, could see some clear results. Makes sense. Great. Group 4, do you all mind sharing?
Yes. So we actually picked resume 6 for a couple of reasons. I haven't finished writing them all, but some of them were that they have a concentration in marketing, which is a preferred qualification. They also have more than 4 years of working experience, and they have 4 years in working experience when it comes to marketing, and the requirement was minimum 2. They also wanted a leader, and they have been a marketing manager in their past job. They also have experience in managing big groups, like we can see in their EMB medical service manager role. And even though this is not a marketing role, it is a skill that can be transferred. They also have experience presenting to small audiences, which is also something that they wanted. We can see that in their experience in their undergrad when they were a vice president for their business club. And I feel like overall they have basically everything that they want. So that's why we went with resume 6, and our entire group was agreeing on that one.
Awesome. Thank
Thank
you. Jen. Okay, and then last group 5.
We also chose resume 4 for the concrete examples and also the level of detail. We felt that they just really chose like a good way to tell a story of why we should choose them as a candidate.
Awesome. Sometimes it can be hard to extract a story from a resume, but I think sometimes someone does a good job and kind of get to see how the pieces align. Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing on that. And I will say part of the reason I think this exercise is pretty cool is because for a lot of you, within 2-3 years, we've had folks from all of your programs be involved in recruiting back. And often what will happen is a recruiter will come to you and say, hey, we're looking to fill this role. Hey, we're thinking of places to go, and either the alum will be like, hey, if you want good candidates, I know of a place, I graduated from Vanderbilt, there's this master's program, you should take a look at it. I can help connect you with people. And often, or sometimes they'll be already coming to Vanderbilt and they'll say, hey, we know you're an alum. Would you help? Would you look at the resumes? Would you help us decide who we should look at or talk to or interview, or sometimes even ask you to be involved in the interview? So I know it's kind of wild, but in just a couple of years, you all could be in this exact situation. So in case you all are wondering who was picked, and the way this played out was, for this scenario, all of the 6 applicants applied, and there were some Owen alumni who were involved reviewing the applicants. All of the candidates did get interviewed, but only one of them was offered and accepted the role. It was actually candidate number 1, which I think is interesting because whenever I've done this, people usually don't pick candidate number 1. Because there was some alum involved in the process, we asked them, we'll be like, oh, like how did, so we don't always get a chance to do that, but we knew the alums and be like, oh, how did you all pick that candidate number 1? And yes, Jocelyn, thank you. We are right at time, so I'm going to keep going for just about 4 more minutes. But if anybody needs to drop off, you can pick some of that up in the recording. But I think when we asked the alums, why was it that candidate number 1 was picked? One of the main things they said was that candidate number 1, I don't know if any of you know, but Mattel is located, their headquarters is in the Los Angeles area. And candidate number 1 had a lot of experience in the Los Angeles area, and Mattel really wanted someone who they thought would take the role and stick around for a while. And both from the resume and from the interview, they felt pretty confident that candidate number 1 would do that. They also thought that candidate number 1 was a great fit. Mattel, as you can imagine, is not a place. I'm imagining some of our Masters of Finance folks are like, why would anybody want to work for a toy company like Mattel? Maybe some of you would, but the person really loved the culture there. I talked to him a little bit after the summer that they spent at Mattel, and I was like, oh, it was awesome. During my final project, I was running around with Nerf guns and presenting and shooting people with the Nerf gun. Nerf is associated with Mattel. So yeah, so as you can imagine, the right person and the right fit also is pretty important for that role. So if that gives them some hope. So in wrap up, I'm curious, any take, you all are done. Thank you. You all did a great job. Your 20 minutes are up as recruiters. Any takeaways, any thoughts from being a recruiter and sitting on the other side of the table, reviewing resumes? Anything that you all want to remember from this? Anything that kind of changed your opinion?
I'll go. So to use keywords is very important, but also how you present yourself in an interview or when you actually talk to someone face to face can be even more important than what's written on your resume.
Andrea, that was great. Well put. I think for me, that's a big takeaway from this too, is, having a good resume is certainly important. I don't think any of those candidates had really truly awful, flawed resumes. but you're right. The way that you present yourself, the way the interview goes, the networking goes, to the poll we did earlier, that can be just as important. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? All right. I know we're getting close to time, so I'm going to keep rolling with a few last things. In the chat, this is, some of you tuned in on our first session, and we had a guest speaker from the data science program. And this was a AI prompt that she suggested. She had some luck with using this prompt for her. I mean, I would say, again, you want to be careful, do this. And of course, it's not going to know all of your experience, but you could provide some of the content from your LinkedIn profile, from your resume, and give this, and then see if it has any input. So yeah. All right, heading back to our slides. While I'm waiting for my slides to come back, one reminder I will give is that the goal of a resume and a cover letter is to get an interview. So really the bigger picture is important. Resumes are important. You want to keep that in mind, but if you could have the perfect resume, I think a lot of students like to think that it's a perfect meritocracy. If you have the perfect resume, you're going to get the job. And I think, as you saw from that exercise, it's not that simple. You know, the perfect resume is to get you to the interview stage. And then in that, you're again proving yourself and showing how you can be a good fit for things. So keep in mind that resumes are used in a lot of different places. So last two slides I'll share. A couple of key takeaways. Please think about things from employer's perspective. Tailor your resume. We didn't get into a lot of this, but it can be helpful. If you're applying to multiple different roles, it may be helpful to have different versions of your resume. You know, one that's tailored towards, you know, you're looking at data engineering roles and you're looking at business analyst roles. You may want to have two different versions of your resume that emphasize the different skills with that, kind of relating to what we talked about the job scan. Good resume is helpful, but of course, networking, interviewing, all those other things are so important. The last slide I have is encouraging you to kind of think about some next, actually, I'm sorry, I got some slides. The couple of things to keep in mind are use the samples and the templates on 1220. If you would, spend the summer and get some feedback from your friends and family. Also, resume and LinkedIn review. I have on here Trinity or Brooke. If you're a data science student, you want to start with Trinity. Over the summer, I know Zeke will be doing some resume reviews, more to kind of follow on that. I know that Byung-ho and myself and Ginny are also meeting with folks who are creating MSFs, who are completing the career curriculum. So keep that in mind. I think that's really helpful as well. So be working on your resume. The summer is such a good time to be working on that, so you have it ready for some of the things that are coming up. And please use the resources that are in the 1220 resource library and elsewhere. We didn't get a chance to talk too much about LinkedIn. It was kind of an add-on to this, but we will talk more. I'll send more in the follow-up email to this. As a reminder, we have the next summer prep session coming up. It's on informational interviewing and networking. A lot of you recognize how important networking is, so that's great. And Byung-ho's got some good content on that. So for next Thursday, if you would, and I'll include this in the email to you as well, please work on these three things: a list of 3 companies you'd like to work at, 3 locations you would like to live in, and 3 job titles that you would like to have. Okay. Thank you all for being part of this. Thanks for doing your short gig as a recruiter with Mattel. It was awesome to see you all in that role. We'll stick around if there are a couple of questions, but I want you all to get back to the things that you are doing, and hope that we get to see you all next week to talk about informational interviewing and networking. So thank you for your time, and I hope your summer is going really well. Take care, everyone.